So, hello everyone. Thank you for coming out to our human trafficking presentation. My name is Elisa DeFalco, and I'm a healthcare provider for several different boards. And today we have a very special guest here with me. His name is Oscar Lopez, and I know him pretty well because we were married for a few years. And when I met Oscar, um, we went through quite some difficult times and more him than me. So the focus on this interview is going to be a combination of giving you the information that the Department of Health and all this human trafficking is trying to disperse into our healthcare field, because there are just too many people going through this case. And Oscar's experienced it firsthand. And I hope that you'll stay through the whole presentation. One, because you need credits, of course, but number two, because this really adds an element of personal touch. And he can tell you things that nobody else can. We can cut and paste, we can make pretty PowerPoints, but at the end of the day, this is really about people. And for us, particularly here in Florida, human trafficking, healthcare professionals on the front line, I thought was the best title for this. And you will see why as we go in. So, Oscar, I'm going to have you say hello and start the ball rolling here about where your experience began. Can we ask you what country you came from?
Oh, how you doing? Yeah, I came from Colombia, South America.
You came from Colombia, and how old were you then?
I was pretty young. I was probably in the area of 20s, early 20s.
Early 20s, so you're only 25 right now, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, so he came when he was young, and I met him as a pen pal. And Oscar came trying to live the American dream, which so many people coming to Florida are. And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Especially, Oscar, you can think off the top of your head 2 or 3 things that make it difficult living the American dream.
Well, the the first thing that comes to my mind is probably when you don't speak the language, you don't have a family members around, surrounding you. Is really tough for anybody because there is no too many places to go to get help, and you end up probably in bad situations. You become afraid. You don't know what to do with your life. If you're going to go to the street and maybe a police officer is going to try to help you, but you're going to be afraid that this police officer is going to maybe take you away. And that's one of the things that a lot of people thinks. Even the police is here to help you, but because you are not fully legal, then basically the person that is on the other side, the officer, it becomes like a threat for you, and you think there's going to be someone that's going to do something bad for you instead of helping you.
And that's a real good point, Oscar, before we even got into PowerPoint, especially for those of our therapists who maybe you're here on a green card, you're not completely a citizen yet, and it makes you feel fearful, like Oscar was saying, to report. Or I remember when we were driving and some of the at the time we would call them non-documented individuals, and they would run because they would think, oh my gosh, immigration are the words I remember us hearing from other people. Your eyes open up and you see the problems they're having, and they're trying to solve them, and yet the people that are supposed to help them sometimes take advantage of them.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah. So I'm going to jump in over here and let's take a look at what this PowerPoint's all about. On the healthcare end of things, or the healthcare spectrum, healthcare professionals are on the front lines every day. And there's all different reasons why they could be sick. Obviously dealing with patients, and time is going by so quickly that they don't get the chance to really ask the questions from these patients that are prospective human trafficked and or labor trafficked. And we're going to talk about your experience being labor trafficked. I wanted to read this, and I thought it was very well done. It was from an interview that aired on Channel 25 News in Miami. It says she began cutting herself up in the emergency room, beaten by the traffickers. But Dr. Heidi Schaefer, the former president of the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beaches, knows why doctors and nurses never step in. And I really enjoy all Dr. Heidi Schaefer has done as a doctor in Palm Beach to help recognize some of these things you're going to talk about. She said, when I trained back in the day in medical school and in residency, human trafficking wasn't a topic we learned about. And I know that I missed cases. And this is a top doctor, and she's been really promoting heavily the movement. And part of the reason why we have these classes that are now mandatory to be looking for these cases. So let me ask you, Oscar, I know you came over initially on a visa. A lot of people come on a visa first to work. Is that
Yes.
right? Before you got the
Yeah.
green card?
You have to have some sort of a visa, maybe a student visa or a work permit or anything to allow you to, get into the United States.
Yeah, so you
But
need
this,
some type of authority to be able to be here.
yeah,
Did you ever have a time where maybe you were sick and you had to go to a doctor while you were still under that visa? You weren't getting all the full benefits of the US.
years ago it was not so much help compared to now, but still, being a young immigrant coming from a city that was basically a big city in California. It was not too many places that you can think to go because you are afraid that maybe you don't know who's going to help you or if they are going to help you, you know, and the lack of communication and the language barrier basically makes it difficult.
Yeah, so you must have at the beginning had to really kind of congregate with other Spanish speaking communities at the time until you learned the language enough to feel comfortable to reach out and not get taken advantage of or get a bill, let's say from a doctor. I know that's happened before where you suddenly hit with a bill that you didn't really understand how much it was going to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I know we see that a lot in Miami, and hence we had this presentation now. I'm going to read this part, kind of a little bit of a disclaimer about what we're doing, guys. So I'm going to just take myself off here for a minute so you can read it with me. This is a CE compliant human trafficking course. The bill, Chapter 2019-152, Laws of Florida, which address healthcare professionals licensed by the following boards: acupuncture, medicine, osteopathic medicine, chiropractic medicine, podiatric medicine. optometry, pharmacy, dentistry, nursing home administration, occupational therapy, dietetics and nutrition, respiratory care, massage therapy, and physical therapy. That's a lot of professionals in this state. Healthcare professionals licensed by these boards must complete 1 hour of continuing education. There's actually some that have 2, so that's why this is a 2-hour course. CE on human trafficking, and post a sign in their office by January 1st of 2021. So Oscar, as of January 1st of last year, they had to start posting signs in their places of business, medical establishments, massage establishments as of January 1st. The legislation also requires that new establishments have a designated establishment manager. In other words, you need someone managing over this demographic within your institution, that somebody's actually watching over this starting July 1st, 2019, and that all massage establishments, regardless of the time the license was issued, have one no later than January 1st, 2020, Chapter 2019 152, Laws of Florida also amended the provisions governing when the board shall take disciplinary action. And that's the key word there. Disciplinary action against a massage establishment's license. Finally, massage establishments are required to implement a procedure for reporting suspected human trafficking by January 1st, 2021, and have a sign outlining that procedure posted in their establishment. So if you weren't aware of all that, I know in the middle of COVID and the crisis, it's very easy to lose track of some very important things. But this one is required of the medical establishments, not just of the practitioner. So let's go in and take a look and see why. Why do we need this? Because everyone says that. I'm a therapist. I take so many CEUs. Now we're going to create a CEU for human trafficking. Please look at what is in front of you. Florida ranks number 3 for the most reported cases in the country. And this is according to statistics of 2019 when we were first putting this program together. Florida ranks number 3. Oscar, any words from your end on this?
I'm amazed to see that this is so high. That we are number 3 here.
Yeah, and he just told you when he first came from Colombia to the United States, he was in New York City. Even New York ranks lower than Florida, right behind California and Texas. So all along that border, what I call the border states, is where we're seeing a lot of this human trafficking going on. And we're going to explain why. But before we do, we started Oscar off in New York. A little bit about his demographic. He was a graphic artist and multilingual, actually. English was a language he learned later on. He was already speaking several other languages, but he learned English while he was here. So you go from New York to LA, to California. What brought you out there?
Because in California was more family that I can think to get close to instead of being in New York that was by myself. So it was a good mechanism for me to at least alleviate the moments of not being able to talk to anybody from the family. So it was a situation that I needed to focus and to be able to go there and establish that relationship and be able to try to, you know, work with the family that I had up there at the time.
Yes, so you did. You had your family was there, and you also had a case of someone offering you a better job from New York to LA.
Correct.
Yeah. And like so many, and I've met so many just like you over the years being in South Florida, where someone takes a job, maybe in Texas or in LA, and then something happens to you while you're out there.
Yeah.
Let me ask you the first question though. Was your salary very high when you were out there?
The lowest at all. I mean, when you are, under a situation that you cannot have a full working permit, anyone take advantage of you, and then basically, if somebody pays $13 an hour for a fully legal person, when you are illegal, they probably paid you 6 to 7 hour, $7 an hour, and sometimes it's
Exactly.
lower.
I hope everyone heard that because I remember this very well, even though Oscar and I are not 17 years old anymore, but we can still remember. I said, why are his wages so low? And it was a very simple answer. We have a lot of undocumented immigrants, or they got caught up in the paperwork, or some attorney took their money and promised to give them that green card or whatever. And now they're stuck in a job where they don't have the papers that you and I have. And it changed your life. So you went to California thinking, okay, I got my family now. I'm going to have a better job. And you had some guys that you were working with, and you were already being human trafficked. We we just weren't using those words then, but that's what was happening.
Yeah, correct.
They took advantage of your wages. They had you working long hours, and I remember more than 14 hours. I never seen them work so hard. And then they decided to take you to Mexico.
Yeah, they
Do you
basically.
want to tell this story of Mexico?
Well, I was basically the group of people that I was working with. They had invited me to go to Mexico because they said that it was another company out there with the same from the same company offering, the possibilities of doing other income. And I went there basically, just to see what the situation was or how I can get better. And once I got there, they took away my papers, my passport, and for over 8 months, I was basically, you know, uh, being in another country with no possibility of having even the situation of getting papers back to me to get back into the United States.
So
So
basically, he had to buy his own freedom back from the guys he worked with who were part of the human trafficking scheme that's basically sold him into slavery. Because when he woke up with his pants and his clothing gone and his papers, the ones he did have that gave him legal access to this country, when the police from Mexico see what he has and he has nothing, what did they do?
no,
They threw
basically
you in
they
prison.
investigate me and then they let me go. But then basically it was no action taken from their side. They don't care. They don't care. So I basically have to find my way out of Mexico, to be able to come back to the United States. Even though I had to go to the United States Consul back there in Mexico, still the time frame for me to be able to get the papers was not like overnight. It was like several months before I was able to get the paperwork back to be able to, cross the border.
Yeah, so it's not like people think, oh, someone stole, if you were here in America, someone stole my license, you would go and report it and you'd get it back within a couple weeks or something. When it has to do with immigration issues, they don't have you documented. You can't document yourself because they stole the paperwork. And now you're in this terrible place and being taken advantage again. So it's very interesting, this story, and I wish we had a whole 2 hours just on it because I think it would help a whole lot of people, a whole lot of students I've seen, not just my own, but in schools all around Florida, to help them get to a place of safety. That would be one of my first thoughts. So among the 10 questions that the boards are asking us to ask, and that's why I thought it'd be best to ask someone who's actually been through it. And our family went through some hard times because it didn't take just weeks or months. Sometimes it took a couple years for us to get the help we needed. In fact, I hope you don't mind my adding this one. Oscar, was when we had to call our congressman's office.
Yeah,
That might be one of your good options if you find yourself in a human trafficking situation, is contacting the congressman's office, because he actually did follow up on the paperwork and made sure there were people in that office that were aware that we were here, especially you. I'm saying we, I'm an American citizen, but you were not at the time because of what happened to you. And you need someone to keep their eye, especially a governing official, over those documents so you don't get lost in the shuffle.
exactly.
So here's one of the first questions they ask. What other types of human trafficking? That one we're going to answer, and I believe we just did. There's two types. There's sexual trafficking, where they sex traffic. In the massage field, what we found was that people were given licenses to do massage, but they were never really given those licenses. Many times they never went to school. Somebody was paid to dummy up those documents. That's why we now have the thumbprint on our licenses. They were also moved around a lot, which reminded me a lot of the labor trafficking you went through, where they will take you from one place to another. They give you extraordinarily low wages, and they tell you, we got food for you, we got a place for you to stay. Is that, yeah, that's
Exactly.
ringing a bell with both of us. Because shortly after Oscar went through this, we wound up moving to Florida. And with his language skills and with his graphic arts skills, it was really the right environment for him to express himself and to find himself in a good culture and not far from home. Colombia was not that far from South Florida. But there was a little problem, though, with the human trafficking that we saw. And I suspected it was more than just human trafficking. There was some sex trafficking. Down in Naranja Lakes, which many people of South Florida refer to as Homestead, there were camps. Remember that, Oscar?
Yeah, correct.
The camps that we used to go to, the people used to live in the mobile homes. And I noticed something about it that number one, all these people spoke Spanish. They didn't speak English, very few. Number two, they all lived in mobile homes. And number three, they were far off the grid. Most Americans would not even know it was there. I mean, would you say that's true, Oscar? Like, what was your first impressions of going down
It's
there?
a situation where you walk into um, mobile home, which is not really a mobile home because it's a trailer. It's one of those semi trucks, backs where they live with a door, no windows, and basically it was just unhuman because they had no AC and
Yeah, no
the
AC.
temperatures in Florida, they are no like at north. In winter, they are super hot all year around. And there were times where temperatures were probably in the 120s inside these trailers, and they had to live in
Yeah.
this type of environment.
We
And it's
we
sad to
tried
see.
to befriend a lot of the migrant workers. We went down and Oscar would speak Spanish with them, and we found out a lot of stuff. We're going back 20 years now, but the food, I remembered the food because I liked the Mexican food that they made. It was very good, but they were very, very destitute. They would pick the fruit from the migrant fields. And one of the things, Oscar, I know you would remember, is that one day we went outside with all the migrants, and that included the children and babies in the field. There were babies in these fields. Where else were the mothers? There was no daycare. I mean, these are people picking fruit for pennies. They just didn't have that available. But there was overhead an airplane that was crop dusting. Remember that?
Yeah,
It,
fumigating the crop.
Yeah, they were crop dusting. And I remember one of the migrant workers telling me they were getting skin cancer. They knew what was happening to them, but they didn't know how to get help. And
Yeah, they
I'm
don't,
thinking as I look at this, going, this is about doctors and nurses and health people with all these people being sprayed chemicals on overhead. Nobody said anything.
they don't care.
Yeah, and then it got one step worse, which is what Oscar was sharing, is you'll find with this labor trafficking as well as the sex trafficking that they move the people around so much. They don't, if you're working in a field, you're only going to be there for the term of that field, that crop that you're harvesting, and then they move you to Texas or they move you somewhere else. So that makes it hard for authorities to really get a glimpse at what's going on. So, Oscar, what would you say are factors that place a person at greater risk of being a victim?
It's
Like,
higher.
how did they get in this to begin with?
Well, they try to escape the difficulty of living in South America or even in Mexico or Guatemala, where their amount of money that they earn each week is like pennies, like nothing. And then, of course, when they get here, they get a little better pay, but they are taking advantage because they work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, picking up, vegetables or fruit or whatever. But the amount of money that they make, sometimes they work and work, and at the end of the month, the money is not there because the company that was doing the pickup of the fruit or the vegetables, they disappear. So all of a sudden, they have no wages to be paid. So there are people that basically face that, and it doesn't happen every day, but it is happening.
Yeah, and even there where it's saying sex and labor trafficking, it doesn't always have to be one or the other. Sometimes it could be both. If that, say that worker wasn't able to come into work for that week because they were sick. And I've heard of females being taken advantage of, saying, well, you owe me my wages, you didn't work. So there
Exactly.
was a lot of that type of thing going on. Um, if you and I now, knowing this, what we know today, how would you identify an individual who may be a victim? How would we?
Well, you can identify the person just by the way they what they do. There are times, for instance, if you go to even a corner store or even to a Home Depot, and all of a sudden you see 8, 10, 12 men in the street right there in the parking lot waiting for somebody to pick them up so they can do some labor in their house. And when I go look at that, I reflect, for instance, at one time that I pick up somebody from Home Depot, a Guatemalan citizen that was working here, and he came and he did some work for me. And of course, being me, I basically know that I'm saying it because I did it, but because that's the way we are. We got some food for the person. We sit down together in the outside porch. We ate together, and this poor guy basically was saying to us, he never thought it was going to be a situation like this when the owner of the house sit down with him just to have lunch or dinner. And he was grateful. But not everyone does that. Some people basically they just go pick them up and they give them $7, $8 an hour, and they leave them in the street so they continue their search for work because they don't have a job, or they are afraid of looking for jobs because they don't have papers.
Or they're working 24/7 just to keep the roof over their head.
Yeah, most of them basically save money so they can send the money back to their own home countries to
So
help.
that was something very important that Oscar said. What's one thing we can do? We don't always have to say anything. You can suspect it sometimes, but just giving them a place to talk and to eat. I mean, the basic necessities of life. I remember in Homestead them needing clothes. They needed blankets. They needed just simple things that could help to ease their life until we could get them to a place of safety. And they got to get to that place where they trust you. And I would say that that's the bottom line. Even though I'm an American, my husband was from South America. You know what? When you go through something like this, it's traumatic and you don't trust everybody. Or you can tell when they're too busy to really get into your scenario and you really need help.
Yeah.
That's why the PowerPoint. Um, the next section here we're going to go into is the healthcare professionals. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and take it up a notch here because I want you to see. I pulled this story off May 22nd, 2019. This is South Florida sex trafficking victim tells her terrifying story. And we're not here to terrify you, but if we are on the front lines where these people are, we have to know some things about them. So when you have some time, you may want to look at the actual video here, but I want to just read this little piece here. Here in this country, people are being bought and sold like modern day slaves, often beaten, starved, and forced to work as prostitutes or to take jobs as migrant, domestic, restaurant, or factory workers with little or no pay. Human trafficking is a heinous crime that exploits the most vulnerable in the society. There is no picture or profile of a trafficking victim. Men as well as women are being trafficked. And that's what I was going to ask you, Oscar, because I think a lot of people, they tend to think it's mostly women. What would you say to that?
No, it's not only women. I mean, it's men also being used by these type of people because they just want the workforce. They want their a man that is strong to be able to do the job and to accomplish any task. But at the end of the day, when the time it comes to get paid, they walk away or they said, if you don't go away, we're gonna call the police. And of course, the person is already being afraid, so they will run away and they don't get paid, and that's it. So you're basically being taken advantage.
Wow. It's It's just amazing. And the thing is too, when you look at this story, I actually went into it and read the whole story. This was a domestic housekeeper in an upscale, we know how upscale South Florida can be, and you would have never known passing this woman in the hall that she was being labor and sexually abused. And I was just shocked. I'm going, you mean right here? I'm not talking like Miami where there's, these big events and there's lots of lights and people are drinking. It can be a domestic worker working at somebody's home and this stuff is going on. So we know the difference now between sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Just when persons, both U.S. citizens and foreign nationals, are compelled to perform labor or services through the use of force, threats of force, physical restraint, or threats of physical restraint, serious harm or threats or serious harm, abuse or threatened abuse of law, or legal process or coercion. All of this eventually, sadly, leads to the ER because these people are only as valuable to that boss as long as they're making money. When they're not making money anymore, they could kick them to the curb and they don't care. They're undocumented anyway. I know it's a hard for these people to have, but that's why our profession's trying to step in and find out where along the way we can be of help. And so this just gave a little picture of the different types of human trafficking where a person can get into debt bondage and they never knew it. They were told they owed $50 to go over the border to get to the United States and find out once they get there with a gun and knife in their face that unless you give me X amount of dollars, you're not going to live. Forced labor, bonded labor, child soldiers, sex trafficking, and forced marriage. All of those are considered human trafficking, at least in this country. In some other countries, they don't consider that. So here are our worldwide human trafficking statistics. So you can look at it, break it down into the circle there, and you see about 5% are in factories, 10% are in agriculture, 12% are doing something else, 27%, and that's a high percentage, are doing a lot of work in the domestic arena, houses and things of that nature, cutting grass, and 46% is in prostitution. So it's obviously is hidden in plain sight. And we just, like Oscar said, you're just so busy, you don't realize what's in front of you. What are the factors that place a person at being at greater risk? You can obviously read this along with us, but I'm going to ask Oscar because he was the one that actually lived it. And there were times I'm not sure if he thought he was going to make it out. So Oscar, what do you think puts these people at greater risk for these types of?
Well, being afraid because they don't know where to go. And of course, they don't have any help from anybody. So they are vulnerable and they are basically, some of them basically depend on the job to be able to pay the amount of money that they pay to be able to come to this country to work. And if they don't work, they cannot get the pay, the balance for this crossing the border cost money. A lot of people basically don't think about that, but there are people that comes illegally here and they pay for it. They pay money to get across the United States, and that's the part that a lot of people basically work 2, 3, 4 years for free to be able to pay for this type of service. So
It's
you're a slave.
really terrible how they just go after them in this system. They know you're already having a hard time. And here it's giving us a list of, childhood abuse and neglect and how they find kids off the street to solicit children in the foster system, runaways, your Native Americans, Native Hawaiians. Matter of fact, I'm going to put a finger up here on Native Americans. Right now, there are 5,000 Native American women missing in the past few years. And that scares me because they can't seem to keep control. They don't have documents. The authorities say on the reservation that they don't have records keeping for that many people to go missing. I'm going, this is a lot of people to be trafficked, whether it's human trafficking or labor trafficking. They're coming from somewhere, and it's telling us. Victims of violence, the LGBTQ community, migrant workers, like we said, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, people with low income, people with a history of substance abuse, and communities exposed to intergenerational trauma, which I saw a lot of that in my home state. And every state has their community where there's a lot of intergenerational trauma going on. So these are factors that put these people front row and center to becoming a trafficking victim. So here's a myth versus a fact. The myth: human trafficking is a global problem. There is nothing I can do to help. Well, human trafficking has been reported in every single state in the US, even though we're amongst the highest within the top 3. It's been said of every state, and victims must be held against their will using some form of physical restraint or bondage. That is a myth. Here's the fact. While some traffickers physically hold the people they exploit, it is more common for them to use physical means of control, like fear, trauma, drug addiction, threat against families, and a lack of options due to poverty and homelessness can all prevent someone from leaving. Some individuals who experience trafficking may also be manipulated or believe they are in love with their trafficker. It's a whole psychosocial thing that would actually require probably someone who is a psychologist to get into the depths of that. But I know I have seen and I have heard as a teacher some of these women that were being trafficked.
Terrible.
So recruitment methods, that's why I wanted to wait. How do they, if they're going to do this, it's a two-part action. Obviously, there's the person, but how do these people who human traffic, either way, labor or sex, what are they doing to draw them in? What would you say, Oscar?
Well,
What's the
they,
forces that
they,
drive them in?
they picture a pretty picture of what they can accomplish in another location, in another country, and they basically tell them that they're gonna do better, they're gonna do wonderful things, and when they come out here, basically they take away the passport, and they are not able to do anything because they get afraid, and then they tell them if they do something, they call the authorities or whatever, and that's it. And that's why they become victims automatically.
So there you have it, guys, right from our PowerPoint, exactly what Oscar said. And I purposely didn't want to ask him too many of the questions before we went in, because sometimes getting the real reaction, the raw reaction when you ask these questions, it actually jogs their memory. And he just said it. They will confiscate passports. They'll take your identification or any form of ID that you have, including a driver's license if you get one, threaten to shame them by exposing or humiliating their families, threatening imprisonment or deportation, debt bondage through enormous financial obligations, controlling their money. And this is another big one, I'd say, isolating them from family, friends, and the public by limiting contact with outsiders. I always look for that now. I look for women and men that I see, and I try to say hello and make eye contact with them and just let them know you're not here by yourself in the instance that they want to open up. And that has happened. That has happened in South Florida. But it takes time for them to befriend someone because, like Oscar said, right now, this might be your neighbor next door, a domestic servant that you hardly see, maybe just barely, and you don't know. Are they being trafficked or are they? Are they, being labor trafficked? They're not just going to open up and tell you that because right now they got a roof over their head and they got food in their mouth. So we need some other third party, which we have those references for, to reach out for them. And how do we identify human traffic in the words of the victim? Well, we were going to do this as a video, a short video, but we decided to actually take you there live through our Zoom. So you're hearing straight from Oscar about what it was like to, at 20 years old with no family, to get from New York to the Los Angeles, not living the dream, being told he should be thankful for having any job, then being thrown in a Mexican prison before making it to Miami. So, Oscar, what are you doing now? Obviously, time has gone by. What are
Eh,
you doing now
Well,
with your skills? he does have his green card. He does have his citizenship.
Exactly. Well, nowadays I'm a computer consultant. I have my own company, and uh, I I reflect back in those days when I had really difficult times, but that's a long wait from the day that I came to what I am, who I am now.
Yeah.
It took a lot of courage, a lot of hard moments, a lot of tears, but here we are. And I really hope that somebody will do something to help those people that are right now facing what they are facing right now, because it's tough, especially when you are alone and you have no family. That's tough, and that's what a lot of people out there, especially the immigrants, people that comes out here to do the labor, they don't have family. They basically come and they do the job and they go back to their families, year after year. Sometimes they don't get the payment that they were offered, and it's tough.
Yeah, in fact, I've just pulled this up on the vulnerable populations. Guys, take a look up here. How to identify who may be victims. Everyone has the potential to discover a human trafficking situation. There is so much of it in South Florida. And I don't want to leave it there because it goes around the whole state. But South Florida, there are specific areas that the authorities have locked down and know that these are trouble areas to troubleshoot. And it says, while the victims may sometimes be kept behind locked doors, they are often hidden right in front of us all. On construction sites, in elder care centers, in agricultural fields, in restaurants, in nail salons, and hotels. Traffickers their use of coercion, such as threats of deportation and harm to the victim of their family members, is so powerful that even if you reach out to the victims, they may be too fearful to accept your help. Knowing indicators of human trafficking and some follow-up questions will help you on your gut feeling that something is wrong and to report it. Now, as a CE provider, every 2 years, we know that the state of Florida, it mandates that we take our credits in the classroom. And I remembered being in the classroom with a very large class. There happened to be about 80 people there that day. And my daughter was with me. So Rachel was with me that day. And I noticed that there were 3 girls hanging very close together, and they were speaking a foreign language, but it was foreign to me because it wasn't Spanish, it wasn't English, it wasn't anything I knew. But my daughter, our daughter, heard what was being said and basically was telling me, Mom, there's a situation here. These girls don't speak English, and I know they haven't ever even come from a medical school, but yet they're here. And that precipitated a call followed by some conversation with the local authorities in my area where it was so heavily prevalent. And I said, you may want to bring out some of your agents, because if these people are taking our classes, you guys are taking our classes, if you passed the test in English or Spanish, well, then we know you're good. But if you're speaking another language, that tells us you couldn't have taken our test because our test is only written in English and Spanish. So what is that telling you? It's telling you somebody's working in the labor field and someone's really pushing them into it. So that's why I'm bringing this live to you, because it's live in our fields. It's amazing the things that you're going to see and hear. So we'll go to our next slide. Some things that, red flags. These are red flags that if you're seeing them in human trafficking, you might want to keep your eyes open. If they're very underemployed, like Oscar said, they're making minimal wages or they're not getting their wages. Tattoos and actually branding. They will actually brand a tattoo into their people to make sure that nobody else gets their person. It's like human cattle. Hotels, especially with young girls, could be young boys too. Provocative clothing, claim of an older boyfriend, unable to make decisions without approval and or scripted communication. And do not approach the trafficker yourself, because this could put you or the victim or future prosecution at risk. Sometimes different agents or agencies are already at work. You may feel like you want to do something, but they're already in the background doing the work. And in fact, Oscar, I'm going to let you answer that because I think you see a little more of that than I do.
Yeah, well, there are places where the the authorities already are working in the background and they're basically just investigating. And then if you go in and try to do something, then basically that's going to harm the investigation or damage whatever it's going for, you know. So it's something that you may want to just, when you see it, just report it, but don't get so, you know, so close to being able to try to stop it, because that's when you can get into problems.
So this is where I'm going to use Oscar's help, because I never knew, being a massage teacher at the time, 20 years ago, that I would run into some scenarios like this. And first, when the students told me what was going on, I was really nervous. And then I got even more nervous. I got on the phone and I'm just spilling my guts. Well, apparently I was spilling my guts to the wrong person, because there are different departments in the agencies, and it depends too. Is this a federal crime we're talking about? Are we talking about something going on your city level? You know, all I knew is that there was trouble in River City and they needed help. And one thing I'll never forget, the agents were telling me, be careful. If you see anything, we understand you're in a position that you see things, but report it to us, because we may already be working on some of these things. It may be your mayor, it may be your sheriff. They may already be on these, and you don't want to blow it, and you don't want to get hurt while you're trying to help. So that's why we have red flags too. We're not saying don't do anything, but we are going to say, please report it to the local authorities. And if they feel it needs to climb up the ladder higher, they'll know who it needs to go to. And they do answer. Sometimes, I know I've talked to some of you when we did a very similar presentation for Medicare law. And we thank you, because you know what? You help report crime. It went up 300%, the reports from our presentation. So we know that it's working. But when it comes to this stuff in people's lives, let the authorities take the lead. Just tip them off, let them know, and you can do it anonymously too. You don't have to put your name out there. Is that still true, Oscar? Do they have to give their name or they can be anonymous?
Anonymous, you have to be, you can do it either way, but if you're afraid, you just tell them that you don't want to, give your name.
Okay. Yeah, because we have a lot of labor trafficked individuals, again, down in Miami, and they get into a job and then they start finding and seeing things, and they're afraid for their lives because now they've invested in this company and they don't want to tick somebody off, but they don't know where else to go. So
Exactly.
these are all the different forms that it takes on. So now we're going to ask a few questions. Healthcare professional, questions to ask. And let me come up here. The first thing is, what should you say and what should you not say? Here's some ideas from the American Medical Association. Recommended questions by the American Medical Association where appropriate to the healthcare's professional scope of practice. In other words, if you're a massage therapist, you're not going to be asking questions outside of the scope of your practice if you're not practicing as a doctor. But here's a few comfortable starters. A few questions to open the dialogue might include, are you comfortable? Are you hungry? Where are you living? Who are you living with? Do you feel safe? Has anyone ever hit you or forced you to do something you didn't want to do? Do you live, work, and sleep in the same place? That's a big one, guys. I'm calling that out. Do you live, work, and sleep in the same place? Because I've met a lot of people who sleep and live in warehouses. And it's right there in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You would never know, but it's there. And have you ever traded anything for sex? Find a way to separate the patient client from the people who brought them in so that they might be more comfortable. So someone's bringing them into the hospital, let's say, because they have a broken arm. You want to separate them from whoever brought them in so we can get some of these questions answered. And Oscar, did you ever have any of that go on in your history, or did you know of it with any of your people that you've encountered?
Well, back in time, recall the accident that I had with a bicycle. Somebody basically hit me and they ran away. They just look at me and they continue. So whenever the paramedics were basically trying to help me, they just look at me and they did the first aid type of thing and they walk away. So sometimes you don't really get the help that you need because they look at you like you are just a third country person, somebody that I think doesn't have, you are not on the same level that they are. So it's just,
So you got hit by a car on your bike,
yeah,
and basically they left you there,
yeah,
kind of
without even,
patched up your
nothing.
wounds and sent you on your way.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
So things like that happens and they don't, a lot of times people don't care. It's just they walk away because they see you that you are basically a foreigner and they don't care about the human portion of the, they don't see you as a human, they see you as somebody that just came to this country and that's it.
So that's really something that probably a lot of these people that we're talking about have never had someone who really took the time with them medically. They probably don't have medical insurance is what I'm thinking, you know? Where are they going to go to? A basic clinic? Their trafficker is just going to hold their hand and let them in. It's not that easy, is it?
No, and many times when they are illegal, they don't think to go to get help because they think that they are going to be reported and to be taken out of the country. So they stay silent and they do bad things to these people and they don't care because they know that they are not going to being report. So that's it. So if somebody's being hurt or somebody's sick, they don't want to go to a doctor because they are afraid that they are going to be reported. And
Yeah, especially if they don't have papers or their trafficker took their papers.
yeah,
They don't want to get caught in the medical office being undocumented or using a false name.
exactly.
Wow, this is amazing. So the next part we want to get into a little bit is where to get help. The victim is still in the middle of trauma. They don't even know which end is up. They don't know who to trust. It says, if you believe you have identified a victim still in the trafficking situation, alert authorities at the numbers provided below. It may be unsafe to attempt to rescue a trafficking victim. You have no way of knowing how the trafficker may react and retaliate against the victim and you. A lot of victims or a lot of traffickers do not travel alone. Like we saw down in the migrant camps, you have a large group of people being subjugated, but the people with the big guns are the ones who run the show and the big money. And where are they going to go in the middle of the Everglades where it's just infested with alligators? And that's a real thing. I know other people watching this on the other side of the country are probably going, what are they talking about? The Everglades is a real thing. And we know because we used to have alligators come right up. It's a form of terror. It's like having a pit bull, except you got alligators instead. So now you've identified, or you think you've identified, someone that's in the trafficking situation. What would you recommend they do? And what would you recommend they not do?
Well, they should try to talk to an authority somehow. They need to be able to get somebody to help them because that's the first thing that they need to do.
Yes.
And, if you find out that somebody is doing any of these, the best thing to do is to report it to authorities, not to try to go to help that person because sometimes by trying to help it, the person you may get into trouble or get somebody into trouble because maybe an investigation is going on. So the best
Or
thing to
even the victim themselves, if they were in the middle of working on the case and now the case has been blown because you just jumped up to the plate, at the house, and you don't want to see them beating up on somebody, which is nothing anyone, none of us want to see that.
no,
But if you jump in, they could have a gang of 10 people and they could kill you before you ever get a word out.
yeah.
So here we put the Human Trafficking Division of the FBI of Florida has provided the following link for viewers of this presentation. So if you do have to report something and you suspect something, it's like they always say, if you see something, say something. Well, that say something is directed at that link and that phone number right there below. You can take it with the PowerPoint, you could take it with the video. But trust us, it's going on all over. I know we keep mentioning South Florida because it's where we lived for 25 years. And that's where most of this type of crime is going on. And primarily because you got a larger population too. But it's still all over Florida. And they do have, if you call the human trafficking hotline, don't worry that if you're calling from Tampa or from Jacksonville, they will forward your call. The agents are usually out in the field, or the sheriff or whoever it is that's handling these cases is usually out in the field. They can't grab the phone right that minute, maybe not for a couple of days, depending on what they're doing, but they will get back to you. Okay. So now number 6 is where to get help. What if the victim has escaped? They finally have had it and they need a way of escape. How would you do that?
That's tough.
So if, however, you identified a victim who has escaped the trafficking situation, there are a number of organizations to whom the victim should be referred for help. Shelter, medical care, legal assistance, and other critical services. Are these things that they're going to need after leaving? The answer would be, yeah, they probably would. So the Arc of Freedom Alliance, the phone number is there, and the National Human Trafficking Line. Those are 2 great resources to help get those people, if after they escaped, back on their feet, because they're going to really have to rebuild their lives after that. Matter of fact, this is where I'm going to step into the part 2 of Oscar's experience, because you went to Mexico. You were down there for how many months before you could get back over the border to the United States? When they left you, when all the workers in LA left you there basically to die,
It was 8
how
months.
long did it take you to get back to the United States?
It was about 8 months.
About 8 months. And of course, you're coming across the border. Did you walk, or did someone give you a ride?
Well, after I get my paperwork, I basically went across the border walking.
Yeah, so he went across the border walking, and imagine now you're back in the United States and you have to find shelter and medical care and legal assistance. Oscar, what did you do? When you got to California,
Back
what
in,
was, besides saying thank God I'm out of here, out of Mexico, what did you do next?
well, try to find a job to be able to do something, and then I got to a church where basically they gave me some help, some assistance, and I was homeless for at least a week and a half, and then thank God someone gave me a hand, and I was able to get a place that I can live, and that I was able to survive, and that's it. I
Yeah,
started
so
working, and that's it.
all those practical needs, I mean, well, a matter of fact, I never asked you this question and it's not on here, but I do think about it is, was there ever any time in this whole process that you were thinking, I really like to get out of here, but I don't know how?
Yeah, I mean, all these things go through your mind. I mean, when you're alone and you don't have a ways to survive because the doors are being closed, the only thing you want to do is just go to think about, I want to go back, but you cannot do that either because you are without money, without any help. So it's tough. But then you are able to survive. That basically, you have to survive. You got to look for help, and that's it.
So that's the key there is once the person has been identified and you know that they're being victimized, they might even, I had one who talked to me, and I know we both had one that was talking to us, but she was not in a position financially to leave because her lover was also an immigrant too. And that gets to be a real sticky situation because then you got two undocumented people and it's already hard enough as it is, and you can't pick up and you can't leave because they didn't have that and it turned into an abusive situation. So they need to get help. And we gave two numbers that are really good at helping people in this situation. I know they speak Spanish too. I'm not sure about the other languages, but if you can get to the Arc of Freedom Alliance or the National Human Trafficking phone numbers, those would be two great places to get started and get back on your feet. And of course, like Oscar said, if you do know of a church or something like that where they can help you, that would be a great thing as well. Public and private social services are available too. There are a lot of good people out there. So ending toward a positive note, there's rescue, there's food, there's shelter, there's clothing, there's referral directory here. I actually put my cell phone up here. I'll take my picture down so that you can see it. But 1-888-373-7888. This is the Human Trafficking Hotline. And this is the call to action. It's a programmed rescue line, the Human Trafficking Hotline. And of course, there's always 911. But if you're trying to plan your steps out of a trafficking situation, I would 911 is great, is help you save your life, but you might want to have the human trafficking hotline too. So you have a backup plan B about once I get to the other side of this, how am I going to make it over there? Oscar, do you remember the Coyotes?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
all that.
Okay. So this isn't a private joke between us, but we're familiar with the Coyotes. And because there's been this wall being built and all the drugs and stuff that they were feeling are coming over from Mexico and all of this, let me just say, I'm not in the middle of the politics of it, but I'm always in the middle of human concern where there's really good people being taken advantage of. And I know Oscar feels that way too. So Oscar, could you tell them a little bit about the Coyotes? Because this won't be just a Florida presentation. We'll be talking Texas and California too. And Texas is that border state where a lot of stuff goes on. And I know you know more about it than I do.
Well, there's people out there that they are called the Coyotes. Basically, they are people that get paid to traffic humans from Mexico to the United States or from other countries. And a lot of people in the news, they can probably uh, learn that they are up there, and these people basically charge from $3,000 to $10,000 to get somebody here in the United States illegally. And
Wow.
very dangerous. It is rough. I mean, it is a lot of the ladies get sexually abused in the traffic in the process of being bring to the United States. Um, Not too long ago, I was looking at a program. They basically uh, they show how people being uh, moved from country to country, all the way from South America, and they are not just people from South America. They are people that come from Africa. They
Wow.
goes into South America, and from South America they go through the jungle of Colombia, through Panama, and then they continue the roads from Central America all the way to the border. And that's where the Coyotes take place. They basically they help this person to go across, and they charge money for that.
So the Coyotes are basically like tour guides that take people from other countries through Mexico up the border to get them across. But then by the time that they're supposed to cross them is either when they sexually abuse them, or they ask for more money, or they just bail on them, taking what money they had.
Yeah,
Wow.
sometimes they leave them behind, and some of them go through the desert, and they are basically die there because they don't have water. And that's why the immigration works so hard to try to help, especially these people that are being trafficked, because some of them are being abused, or some of them basically are left behind because the coyote doesn't want to get cut. So they fly away, they basically go away and leave the people behind.
Yeah, because they've already got the money, so they don't feel it's their responsibility if people get sick and die trying to make it over the border of Mexico.
Exactly.
I remember just before the pandemic, driving through Texas, really close to El Paso. Matter of fact, I could look across and I could see Mexico, and I could hear Mexico, and it was broad daylight, and I could hear gunfire in the middle of the day. It wasn't even at night. And I thought, I know that we've been to Mexico, and I'm wondering what on earth is going on over there? What could those poor people be going through just on the other side of the border?
Yeah.
And I know that this is going to be an ongoing, people are going to debate the issue, but I feel for the people that are caught over there, and especially now with the bigger cartels and things like that. Um, so it's kind of like the Americans in reverse, the Americans going over to Mexico and some of them disappearing in mass quantity and nobody knowing where they went. So that's another element of it. Wow. So guys, we're covering a lot of ground. And like I said, the very first thing, apart from making that call to action, is springing into action and knowing that they're going to need resources. They're going to need food, they're going to need shelter, they're going to need clothing. And you may say, well, you know, you can send them here or there. Yeah, but most places are not going to take them forever. So they're going to need some stable resources. And that sometimes is what actually brings them back into the human trafficking cycle all over again. Because some people have come out and they've gone right back in because they haven't had those resources. Wow. So taking a look at these public and private social services that are available, we have the National Human Trafficking Victim Assistance Program. I wanted to make sure I read this one because it is important. The National Human Trafficking Victim Assistance Program provides funding for comprehensive case management services on a per capita basis to foreign victims of trafficking and potential victims seeking health and human services. Certification in any location in the United States. The grantee provides case management to assist a victim of trafficking to become certified and other necessary services after certification through a network of sub-awardee in locations throughout the country. Now, let me show you here on the right, though, what that might look like. These grants ensure the provision of case management, referrals, and emergency assistance, food, clothing, shelter to victims of human trafficking and certain family members. They help them gain access to housing, employability services, mental health screening, and therapy, medical care, and some legal services, enabling them to live free of violence and exploitation. Now, Oscar, do you remember any of this when I'm trying to think 25 years ago. Did they give you food, clothing, and shelter when you came back from Mexico and now you're back in
No,
California?
well, at the crossing, the immigrant basically give you the interview, and they do assist you at the moment right there. But this is a one-time thing right there. But
It,
once you are released and then you're ready to go across, then you are on your own.
okay,
It's
so
like,
they just give you food and clothing enough and shelter for that moment.
so,
It's not going to be a long-term thing.
no, but they will tell you basically they guide you through some agencies that can actually help. But you gotta remember, if you are scared, the last thing that you want to do is call somebody because you don't know if that person is gonna really help you because you're being afraid.
Exactly.
So you run away because you try to avoid contact with anybody.
So here, this one, the National Human Trafficking Victim Assistance Program, this one is actually, it is a government endorsed, or it is backed, and people do use the resources, but just want to make sure you know how long the resources will be there. And especially I'm thinking if you have children or small children, you know, how long is this food, clothing, and shelter going to last? A matter of fact, it may not be the best time for me to ask, but I'm going to ask you. We have all these migrants in the camps that they've been incarcerated there, essentially. Not enough food, not enough medical care, not enough of anything, basically wanting to send them back home. Do you have any idea, is there anything that we can do for them?
It's tough. Because once they are in there, they are basically, waiting for the process to take place. And that's it.
And that can take years.
Could take, depending 3, 6 months, 8 months, a year.
Yeah, it depends on how many they have and how much staff they have
Yeah,
to help them get through there.
exactly.
Wow. So looking at a little bit more of the public and private shelters social services available. So this is a different organization. This is Salvation Army Resources. They do comprehensive care management. We give ongoing care to those escaping the life of human trafficking, along with the immediate needs of shelter, transportation, food, and clothing. We address physical and psychological trauma through a variety of services. And again, there it says including, and I provide the link there for Salvation Army for human trafficking. You may want to take a look at this because you know what, Oscar, I don't think that 25 years ago there were as many resources as
No.
there are now.
No, at all. I mean, this is a lot.
This would have made your life a lot easier if you would have had a list like this, but look at some of the things that it does cover. It's medical and dental, victim advocacy, crisis intervention, safety planning, employment assistance, legal aid, translation, oh my goodness, translation, which was many documents, by the way, that come out of South America and elsewhere, they need to be translated, and that costs money. Job development, repatriation, social service benefits, substance abuse treatment, and child care. So I think Oscar's saying here that the one good thing that we could take away from this is that the system has improved over 20 years. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what it was. Because talking to Oscar about this, when you know somebody who's been through it, who's willing to open up and share, because I know that there's going to be people watching this, and this is it's going to ring a bell with you. And the first thing you think of is, we got to get them out of that situation. Well, yeah, everybody wants to get out of this situation. But the second situation is house, food, clothes, and how are we going to make it from here until we either make it in America or we make our way back home. And it's sometimes not all that easy.
Yeah.
In fact, Oscar, for you, there was a time period where you kind of got lost in the shuffle, and wasn't it the Colombian consulate stepped in to help find you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was when your paperwork was all taken.
Exactly.
And so nobody knew where you were at the time. until the Colombian consulate stepped in. So the same kind of scenario here in America. Yeah, we want to get our paperwork and get our ducks in a row, but we also need some real resources. Number 8, and we're coming to a close pretty soon here, guys, is establishing a protocol with validated assessment for identifying victims. That's a mouthful. But I know that just talking to Oscar and you hearing his story, you're already getting a picture of what kind of assessments you might need. So Heal, Traffic, and Hope for Justice Protocol Toolkit for developing a response to victims of human trafficking in healthcare settings. Guys, this thing is long. I have read through it. We could do another 2 hours just on this, but I would tell you, if you work in any medical facility, click that link, healtrafficking.org, and get or to receive a copy of the protocol toolkit that would help you, like a checklist. Here's some, matter of fact, I'll practice with Oscar since he's here. Here's their part of their checklist, screening questions that you can use for your assessment. So, can you leave your job or situation if you want? Can you come and go as you please? Have you been threatened if you have tried to leave? Have you been physically harmed in any way? What are your working or living conditions like? It's like what Oscar said. We saw that with the migrant workers. Those trailers and those, as a matter of fact, I'll pull them up. Oscar, remember when we were doing the tamales in the trailer?
Yeah.
It was over 100 degrees in I remember I just had sweat pouring off of me, and we're used to being in 90-degree heat in Miami. So to be in those trailers with no air conditioning, sweating like that, that would be a working condition that wouldn't be healthy. Here's something else you can put on your screening assessment. Where do you sleep and eat? Do you sleep in a bed or on a cot or on a floor? Have you ever been deprived of food, water, sleep, or medical care? Have you gone through any of those things, Oscar?
So there were times where basically needed to work for hours, even at night, leaving to about 3 o'clock in the morning. And, you work in a place where that's the only way to survive, is just to continue working there. And then when you leave the place at 3 o'clock in the morning, you want to go home or to wherever you are living and sleeping, staff. After, working 12, 13 hours a day, each day after day, you get tired because there's a lack of sleep. And the pay is not there. So it's tough.
Yeah, it was very, very hard. And I can imagine when they say, do you sleep in a bed, on a cot, or on a floor? That tells a lot too. That's very telling, because some of these people live in big groups with just mattresses on the floor. We found that with the human trafficking victims. Have you ever been deprived of food, water, sleep, or medical care? Do you have to ask permission to eat, sleep, or go to the bathroom? If you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom right there, that's telling you that someone is trafficking you. Are there locks on your doors and windows so you cannot get out? Has anyone threatened your family? Has your identification or documentation been taken from you? We know with Oscar the answer was yes. Is anyone forcing you to do anything that you do not want to do? So these are just some of the screening questions that's on the tools. So again, if you're a therapist and you haven't really dealt with this before and you're looking for an assessment tool, they've already made it here. It's the call to action, healtrafficking.org, and that will give you a good sense of what you should be asking or what you want to share with them. So now we also have procedures for sharing information related to human traffic. This is what the law has to say. So I know we're almost at the end, but don't give in. I want you to be sure that you got this information under your belt. So I'm going to move my picture so you can see. Laws designed to protect confidentiality and or establish privilege are complex. Federal confidentiality laws and state confidentiality laws vary. Protecting victims requires understanding relevant privacy rules and regulations, evidentiary privileges, state and federal statutes, state and federal constitutional rights, including crime victims' rights and amendments, and the unique status of minors, persons with disabilities, or other potential classes of victims. The importance of privacy and confidentiality. Never really thought about that on that side of it, that what if you want to share something and legally, and depending on what state you're in and who you're working with, is going to be important. So we have our call to action number 3 there, which is our task force guide. And this should help you because, again, state to state, things are different. Were things different in New York than they were in LA for you?
Yeah,
And then from LA to Florida, was that different?
yeah, the laws are different. Everyone, treats different in a different way that it's being treated.
Yeah, so when a friend of yours, say you're with your friend and they're also in human trafficking, and they say, well, let's just go to Florida, you want to know and understand what your rights are. Probably, I would think that's maybe one of the last things on your mind when you're going through trafficking, is to think of a lawyer because you're thinking about how much it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and who's going to protect you and what are they going to do for you, or are they going to work for free? Those would all be questions. Again, I would refer back to the guide so that that would help you to know what to do in that case. And then here's something that I found helpful. I hope it will for you too. 10 referral options for legal services. So on the left, we have the Shepherd Case Management System. It provides a secure, streamlined way for individuals to request assistance for victims of human trafficking. Facilities secure transmission of information for case processing. It's there in giant, bold blue letters, and that would be one that you would want to take a look at, or at least maybe begin a discussion with. The one on the right is the Human Trafficking Pro Bono Legal Center. So the Human Trafficking Pro Bono Legal Center empowers trafficked women, men, and children to seek justice. Pro Bono leads national efforts to hold human traffickers accountable for their crimes and to raise awareness of the victims' rights. By linking trafficking victims with highly skilled pro bono attorneys, HT Pro Bono works to obtain criminal convictions, criminal restitution, and civil judgments against traffickers. With pro bono legal assistance, trafficking survivors can rebuild their lives. So, Oscar, did you have to deal with attorneys very much through your process from the beginning to the end?
There were several times that I had to basically get assistance, and I know also people that have established a connection with an attorney, and the attorney promises things left and right, and they basically get money from the people. And at the end of the road, when you are looking for the results, the attorney is basically not there for you, and it is rough. So you have to really be careful to who you deal with, and what type of attorney you look into, and you have to actually be careful not to call anybody that basically is going to take away the little bit of money that you have to get help.
Have you seen people sent home because of these types of cases?
Yeah, there've been times where basically uh, the attorney is processing the paperwork, and when the person basically appears before the immigration, they find out that they have not done all the paperwork correctly, and they take them right there, and they basically get deported. So
Wow.
that's rough.
So after all this time, you've made it pretty far. You
So far,
took
yeah.
the long journey, but you made it, and now you're able and trying to help other people to recognize, to open up, to give them resources. What would you say to them? What would be your words of wisdom to help them get through this trial?
Just to try to get the help that they need for the with the right organizations, the right uh, helplines, and to be patient, and to try to get the help that they need without being afraid, because a lot of people are there that they are afraid that they basically don't even want to talk to the police because they think that the police is not going to help, but they will if you ask for the help. They will guide you, and they will give you a direction where to go. So basically, that's what I think.
Well, that's really important. I think, like you said, after the trauma and then wanting to heal and move forward, these are two agencies that I found were really good. Heal, healtrafficking.org. That's one that does a lot of work for human trafficking. And Arc of Freedom um, Alliance. these are two really good ones. I try to stick everything in the PowerPoint that I could so that if someone's working in a medical facility and has no reference material to work with, that this would be a good one to begin with and give you the right resources, but also hearing it from the terms of Oscar, who's lived it and now is working with it and trying to help people, is really having that intuition to know when to say, what to say, when to report, when not to report. And now that you've come all this way, Oscar, and I'm just thinking like in the recent past 5-10 years, would you ever think that everything that you've been through, because when you were going through it, it was like hell on earth. Did you ever think or see the day that you would find the light at the end of the tunnel?
I, there were times that I thought I was never going to be like that. There were nights that I thought that, you know, it was impossible, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And if you get the help that you need, you are able to get through, and you're able to make it through.
Do you, you know what? This was one other question. I asked it at the beginning, but of all the states that are in the 50 United States, do you find that maybe there's one state or a couple of states that are more open to helping than others?
Well, I can tell that most of the American people are really good helping others, and they have good heart. Uh, I've been in so many states. I probably can tell that I've been almost every one of the United States, and I've seen good helping hands. And I see good people that really care for others. And I cannot really pinpoint one in specific, but one of them that I really thought was really a nice place. They basically they welcome you with their own, you know, really good was like Hawaii or South Dakota. They really go the extra mile to help you
Hey, I'm
because
going to Hawaii. I see that palm tree back there.
yeah.
But
So it's
South Dakota was.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. So they do have some good organizations. They got boots on the ground. Most states now have established these numbers, these agencies to help people out of this rigmarole or constant life of servitude to somebody else, which shouldn't be. And I hope you guys enjoyed what we were talking about tonight. But just before you go, two things. Number one, we want to thank all the freedom fighters that contributed their expertise. We say thank you and review your call of action in your PowerPoint. And we asked you to sign it, that you would not just take the information and walk away, but actually do something, because if you say something, then things can be done. We just got to say it to the right people, and we know who they are now.
Yeah.
So I hope that you will enjoy this one. And guys, we'll be working on another one. And our plan is to do a little more coverage on some special cases that unfortunately our 2 hours is already come and gone, and it went by very quickly, but we do have more information to bring you, and again, hopes that this touches your heart, that It's more than just words on a page. This is real life. It was Oscar's life ultimately. Mine got involved in it for a period of time, but now we can see that we're all here for a reason, and it's to help somebody. And it may be more than just doing massage is wonderful, your modalities are wonderful, but maybe it's being the ear that opens up somebody to getting out of this black hole that they've been in. So this is our 2-hour presentation on human trafficking. We hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to leave you again with my email. It's lymphedoctors@gmail.com. So it's lymphedoctors@gmail.com. Oscar, do you want to leave your email?
Yes, Oscar, OSCAR, master, mac@mac.com.
Very good, because you never know, there might be someone reaching out to you even through the PowerPoint that would like to speak to someone just like you. And I thank Oscar for taking this time tonight for 2 hours. We hope it will bless many of you. And we thank you.
Thank you.
And hey, before we say goodnight, guys, you guys have a quiz, but it's a short one. So no worries, okay? All righty, so thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and jump off our PowerPoint here, and thank you for all your time.